Hello and welcome to Stampscapes 101. I had a couple of unfinished pieces sitting around the desk, and I like to finish these pieces off, kind of looking at them over the course of a few days or a week or whatever, however long they've been on my desk. I just get some different ideas on how I can use them, and I like to get around to implementing those thoughts. This one is a piece of the Recollections. I think this is the primary pack foil. Recollections is a brand that's sold at Michael's, and it's on Amazon as well. But it's a nice pack. It's the paper itself, the foils aren't super high quality, but that's fine because they're sold cheap, and I don't really need these foils to be on mounted on a really nice piece of cardstock. They're just mounted on this I don't know, kind of brown paper, and they're kind of thin, but that works to my advantage sometimes because it doesn't curl so much. Sometimes the stiffer ones, they start to bow, and then you have to kind of counterbend, which isn't a problem because they all bend back. But I don't know, the thinner pieces, which I've found in the starting papers and now in the foils, they're just kind of convenient in that they're thin and they are easy to kind of flatten out, both when you're working on them or when you're mounting them. Okay, so this cloud I had previously created with the use of some Brilliance white pigment ink, and I'm going into it again right now just to fill in some areas that had kind of wiped off. I had shown in a video that you can just wipe this off still, even after the ink dries, because it doesn't really adhere to this. It dries on this type of surface without any problem, but on the non-porous styles of cardstocks, a lot of different types of inks don't really adhere to the surfaces. A lot of them won't even dry, but the Brilliance inks are a water-based, fast-drying ink that has been designed to dry primarily on glossy cardstock. That's what it was conceived for. But I've found that it works on other types of surfaces that are kind of unconventional to stamp on, because a lot of the media that we use in card making won't dry on it. But here we have the Brilliance inks. They're pigment inks, so you can put opacity or translucency over the top of something darker and they'll show up. In other words, things like alcohol inks and dye-based inks are transparent, so if you put, if you draw on here, you won't really be able to see anything. Plus, they won't dry, so you have this really fantastic ink here in the Brilliance that kind of opens up the possibilities of using this dynamic surface as a stamping surface. You'll just need to spray seal it when you're done. It changes a little bit when you spray seal, but not so much where it's, doesn't work. Okay, so on this right here, let's go ahead and add a moon in here. But maybe I was going to put some of the winter ash tree in here, and I thought that might look kind of interesting in white. Let's go ahead and give that a try. I had already inked this one. I already used this in white over some Starbrain lapis lazuli. It still has some of that white on here, so I'm just going to use the same. And hopefully I can get a decent impression over the top of this. Now this might be a little bit thick with ink, so I'm not sure how it's going to print out on there. Sometimes when you're stamping out something with the same type of ink over an area in which you've already applied that same ink and it's wet, you might be stamping into it and you might actually be removing the ink as opposed to this ink transferring over there. But sometimes that leaves, kind of an interesting look. Sometimes it looks a little bit three-dimensional. So let's give it a try here. Okay, this one I'm stamping it kind of off the page. I'm giving it some pretty good pressure, but like I said, sometimes that might act to press into the ink that's already on there, and then when I lift this off, sometimes I'm bringing all the ink with it, so it might leave, kind of a partial impression, or it might give me a reverse impression, into that white. I don't know. Okay, then in this case, it really transferred over pretty good. It's kind of ghostly, isn't it? Let's see. Let's go for another one right down here. That actually looks pretty interesting, I think. Um, what I do with that, I'm not sure. I might let it dry, or I might heat set it and then draw on some extra branches into it with some white paint pen if I can. I'm not sure. I think I might need to spray seal it before I do that, because I do think this pen would just be, I don't know if it would transfer on there. It depends how well this pen is flowing. If it's really flowing real fluidly, it'll transfer, but I might be just kind of scraping into that ink, and it would be going up into the tip and kind of clogging it. So it's always kind of an experiment. You got to play around with these things. I don't expect kind of these non-conventional surfaces to play well with me all the time. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky, but it's always fun. You got to go into these types of things kind of like it's like a laboratory, where it's like an experiment, and you got to kind of leave things open for, I don't know, the possibilities of what could happen, as opposed to kind of being upset if something doesn't come out exactly as you want it. I might do the exact same thing again, and it doesn't come out like it did the first time, and I don't know if that's fine with me. I mean, ideally, if you're going for something specific, I know it, where people want it to come out, in a specific way, but I don't know, kind of maybe leave room for variation in terms of your expectations. And it's just kind of a better mindset going into something. That way you're kind of more open to adaptation and kind of improvisation. And that way you can, instead of kind of forcing things or trying to force things in a direction that something might not want to go in terms of media surface compatibility, you might be more open to saying, oh, okay, that's not really working out, but I think I can do this to it. It seems to want to do, whatever. So I'm going to let it do that, and I'm going to work with that new kind of direction. Okay, so I'm putting a little bit of a field of some, what will hopefully look like clouds. And then I just used this sheet protector here last time for a moon. I didn't have a hole punch, but I think this works pretty good because it's like the exact same size as a hole punch. And what we'll do is we'll create a little moon stencil like that. Okay, and so now we have this little full moon up here, like that in the clouds. Okay, and let's see here. I thought I would go for just some word stamp, and I didn't know where I'd put it. I don't know, maybe moon should have been over here and the word should have been over there, but I think we can put a word in here somewhere if it'll fit. Here's this one that says moon or moonlight. Here's night. That might be fairly dramatic. I don't know if I have room in here anymore, though. For it. I mean, I could always move that moon over here and put this right here. Or we could put some stars. That might be interesting, too. Let's try that. Let's go with some stars in there. A little bit of texture instead. Okay, we have some of my Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White. It looks like I'll be needing a new bottle of this before too long. I don't know. This just tiny little bit in here the way that I use it. It's probably actually good for a year if I just use it for a little bit of star splatter painting. Okay, so if you're doing this, you just ink up a little bit or paint up a little bit, like a tiny corner of a brush. Then get a lot of it out of there. You don't need too much. And then you're just going to release a few bristles at a time and get your star pattern in here. It might be snow too. I don't know. I'll decide. Put some of it over my trees so it'll maybe look like a little bit of a dusting of a snowfall in here. And I think that looks okay. Kind of assessing whether or not I want a word stamp in here. Maybe dream would be kind of cool. I'm going to put this up here. As far as my positioning of this word stamp, maybe not ideal, but it'll be okay, I guess. I don't really want to center it because that's not kind of the compositional format here, but let's just see how this will fit in here. You can always do something where you put something right over the top, and it's not really incorporated directly into the scene. But I just want to make this quick. This scene, I don't want to really work on it too much more. But kind of it's simple. It's a simple composition. Let's go with this over here. Yeah, that'll fit in here without any problem, I think. Be careful with pigment ink on non-porous surfaces, especially slippery ones. It's really easy to skew your impressions or to press too hard and it looks kind of blotchy. Which a lot of mine do. But I think that looks pretty good. I want it to look reasonably interesting, and I think it does. Okay, so this one will allow it to dry, and then I'll just put a little bit of border on here, and we'll format this. Definitely we'll need to spray seal it so that all of this imagery adheres. Look at that glowing moon up there in that foil. The thing about foil is, see that color in there? How that white looks like it's really glowing? And it's because, this is a reflective surface, as we can see like that. So as dark as this foil is, it's reflective like that. So you get this lighting hitting that. Even right here, why I don't have like glaring light on it, that darkness is reflecting light, as opposed to, like a piece of, like matte cardstock or something like that. I mean, it is still reflecting some light, but this one reflects a lot more. So you get these kind of just very delicate fields of light white ink on it, but it looks like it's glowing because of that reflective light is shining back at us. So in foil cases, it really is a matter of the light is coming from within the card in many ways because you have that reflected light. It's just reflecting more light than non-reflective, non-metallic surfaces like that. So, all right, so I'll let this dry and spray seal it, mat it, and I'll show you what this looks like. All right, this has been spray sealed. I sprayed it with a Krylon triple thick. And you might be able to tell that we've lost some of the contrast. Now, there was never, super high contrast going on in this piece, but I thought I would use some white paint pen work to kind of push the level of opacity and thus the contrast in the piece a little bit further. So I might have to spray seal this again. But let's do this moon this time with the acrylic paint pen here. All right, so we got to have a lot lighter moon there now. And then I'll go over it again with some additional touches of white pigment ink. And then that was the 3mm pen. And then I'll take the 0.7mm extra fine pen, and I can use it on here now that it's been spray sealed without worrying about some of that pigment ink going up into this tip here. And I should be able to do that, but let's give it a try here. The surface should be nice and textured with the use of that spray sealant. It's a gloss, but it kind of gives it somewhat of a gritty surface finish to it. It's a little bit textured now. Okay, so it's even more textured than pre-stamping and applications of ink. Well, I mean, it's smooth, but when you add that ink on there, it gets a touch textured, but the spray sealant gives it a little bit of a different type of texturing. All right, so I'm just choosing some branches in here, mostly the main branches and the connection points between branches, and adding this extra highlighting. It could represent snow or ice on the trees, but hopefully you can see that it's bringing the trees out a little bit more. I mean, we don't want to do this on every single branch. That would take forever, and it would be overkill from a visual perspective, but it does bring everything out from the background and make the objects look a little bit more dimensional this way too. But something like that should be good. All right, I think that should do it. I think did I just smear that? I might have, yeah, I got my hand into that ink right there, so let me scrape that off a little bit. Gotta watch out for kind of your wet ink when it comes to your non-porous surfaces and slower drying media. Although this acrylic dries reasonably fast. All right, so that should do it with that. You can highlight your word stamp too if you want to, and kind of make it look three-dimensional, but I think that would be a little bit overkill on this piece. Let's see. I'll show you what I'll do on the clouds here. Okay, so on the clouds, what I'll do is I'll punch contrast a little bit more. And when I say contrast or opacity, those are kind of interchangeable, because the more opaque you go with your pigment ink, the more contrast, the whiter it'll be, and it'll have more contrast against the dark blue cardstock. So we're just bringing out that cloud a little bit more, like so. And then, let's hit this little moon here. Hit it with some heat. And let's make it a little bit more light and glowing. And I'm not doing a big slathering of ink. That's what a lot of people do when they first try that, and they say, "Oh my God, it's like, oh my God, I made such a huge mess." No one does what I mention all the time, and that's kind of you apply this in a much more kind of a powdery touch, and it's because everyone has like super wet pads, and they're just not used to applying a very thin layer. Now, some people do that, and I'm like, hey, how'd you do that? And they just said, well, I just did what you said. You know, you just kind of apply a very thin layer of it. They call this dry brushing, where you just take a very dry application of a wet medium and you apply it in whatever areas you want to utilize it in. But a lot of people just aren't used to it. They're really impatient, and they're getting big blobs of paint everywhere, and it becomes a little bit more of a kind of a matter of touch. If you're using a wetter thing, then you kind of have to apply it with a lighter touch. But I'm doing it in a much more kind of a powdery kind of a touch, where it takes several tappings really for you to be able to see it at all. And you just got to get used to it. If you do it that way, there's like nothing that can go wrong because it applies so slowly, and it's just nothing builds up so suddenly that it's going to, but they just keep blobbing it. So just avoid that and just kind of do it in a very gradual fashion, and you'll really be set in terms of your application skills and your ability to achieve whatever type of look you're going after. Now, if you want to go for something, really bold and expressionistic and things like that, then you can go for a much bolder application of it. But when you're first getting used to it, I'd go in a much slower progression as far as your application methodology. Drier the better, and kind of extend out the application time. All right, so that's it right there. It kind of becomes this piece, although we have imagery in here, it really becomes about that moonlight reflecting off of that cloud, kind of that silvery, shimmery cloud in there, doesn't it? So I think it's a pretty fun piece. I'll spray seal this, and I'll try to find a good format for this in terms of matting it and putting it into a card format, and we'll take a look and see what it looks like. All right, we are spray sealed and formatted here. I think that looks like a pretty cool kind of minimalist piece. I don't know if it looks minimalist with the cloud in the background. Maybe it was just the trees over the foil. A little bit more minimal looking, but anyways, we can use a little bit more kind of bling and texture in this piece. And a very easy way to do it is to add in a few crystals here. So I'm going to do that, and that should put the finishing touches on this piece. I'm adding in quite a few because we have a lot of space up there. So these are just some clear crystals right here, and I'll go fairly small with them. If you're ever doing a lot of these crystals, this little jewel picker really comes in handy to handle all these. Sometimes it's hard to tell where you put the little glue dot when there's so many stars up in the sky already in the form of the splatter painting with the bleed-proof white. But if it dries, this glue dries clear anyway. So anyways, there's my little twinkly little dots up there. I think that makes a pretty cute little card. This is the type of card I don't know, I'd probably use some holographic in there or something like that, but if it was for a kid. But these little touches like that, little sparkly touches like that would be perfect for kids. Or just the kid in all of us, I think. Like seeing those little twinkly, little reflective, three-dimensional pieces in there. So, I don't know. Fun little card, I think. And these little clear crystals kind of match the silver foil on the perimeter like that. So, as glary and reflective as that perimeter can be like that, it's kind of, I don't know, in some ways it's kind of understated like this. You can see it looks dark like this when we're just taking a look at it in my room here. But, you know, it'll bring in all the colors of whatever it's reflecting to, like my hand there. And that makes it a little bit more dynamic as well. So kind of mirrored pieces within the piece and a mirrored area on the perimeter like that. Okay, so anyways, hope you enjoyed this card and the finishing off of this piece. It's just really something quite minimal, but sometimes minimal can be quite elegant in the finished results at times, or just kind of fun to do these, I don't know, real simple pieces like this occasionally. Oops, out of focus. Anyways, thanks for watching, and thanks for always tuning into the Stampscapes channel.